Hello everyone, it's Richard Lewis here again with another video. Today, going to be doing a follow-up on one of the biggest stories in the esports space. It pertains to League of Legends. I'm sure you know which one I'm going to be talking about. It's obviously about this whole TSM, Leena, double lift, conflict of interest, and now the owner and founder of TSM, Reginald, you know him, you love him, has put out the esports famous twitlonger to kind of address what's been going on and address the big fuck-up that came out of the leaks that Leena inadvertently made on Double Lift stream. So just to summarize, in case you missed it, I recommend you go watch my first video about it. But long story short, it came out that Leena, the president of TSM, was dating Double Lift, a very well-known North American player, while he was at Team Liquid. They negotiated a trade to bring Double Lift to Team Liquid. Riot Games said that while they didn't investigate the fact that the two were dating, they didn't find anything improper about the trade, but many still feel, and I'm one of them, that this is a pretty obvious conflict of interest. An executive at a company continuing to date and have relations with a subordinate employee. Many people have disagreed with this. I don't know why. I think it's inarguably true by any definition of what a conflict of interest is. And then as a result of that conflict of interest, Leena was behind Double Lift while he was streaming, talking about personal information that related to one of his teammates, and it went out on air and had very bad repercussions and will have bad repercussions for the player in question, the jungler Dardoch. Now, as a result of this, lots of people came out and chipped in with their 2 cents, and I absolutely did, and Monte Cristo did, and Thorin did, and Reginald was put in a bit of a quandary because he's going to have to come out and reply. Now, for me, if I was Reginald and this was my company and a president was kind of behaving in this way and indeed dating one of the players, I would have certainly insisted that that president recuse themselves from operations. That's what I expected was going to happen in light of the fuck-up. I mean, if you weren't going to do it in the first instance, surely you do it now. But Reginald has gone for a very different approach, and as I said, he put out a twitlonger about it. So we're going to break that down, because the twitlonger seems to be incredibly short-sighted and contains what I believe are provable lies. So you can see he opens up with, "Hi all. I noticed a lot of criticism recently surrounding TSM from fans, journalists, and even peers." I like how in that sentence you can see he's like, yeah, it turns out you're not even peers. If you're a journalist or a fan, you're not equal. And it is valid. So good. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you can just end the twitlonger there, but no. So I wanted to take the time to address some of these points and provide a short update, during which he will prove to you just how little validity he thinks your criticisms have. The Dardoch situation. I want to personally apologize to our community for how we've managed the communication of Dardoch's transfer. My goal has always been about setting a good example for other esports organizations on how to treat players. Again, I think this is a little bit of a revisionist history here. I'll remind you about players like Dyrus, for example, which certainly wasn't treated particularly well, but whatever, it's fine. Where we balance business interests while at the same time being fair to players. In this case, we did not live up to those standards. We will reflect on our mistakes and make the necessary changes to prevent this from happening again. I've reached out to Josh to apologize personally, and TSM will be taking action to make sure he feels good about this situation and lands on his feet. Dardoch and I discussed the unfortunate situation, and we both feel better about how things will proceed in the future. So what does this mean? I don't really know. It's very vague. When you talk about reaching out and making sure someone feels good, that says to me, reading between the lines, money. Maybe he's going to be offered, like, listen, maybe we can't get you a transfer, maybe you have to go in a free agency, but we understand we've played a part in that, so we'll give you a sort of goodbye bonus, a golden handshake, if you like, as you go out the door. That would certainly go some way to repair the damage, because whatever happens now as a result of the lack of leverage and bargaining power he's going to have, he is going to be hit financially. There's no getting away from that. We can go into the arguments about whether Dardoch was a toxic asset or not, whether whether he actually had that much value in the space. But now what we know unequivocally, inarguably, is that his next contract is going to be reduced due to the lack of bargaining power and leverage he has as a result of these leaks. So that would make sense to me. No real issues with this part. We don't know what the nature of the agreement is or how amends have been made, so not too much to say, frankly. Doublelift and Leena. This is where the Twitlonger starts to get interesting. Going into the offseason, we had no plans of signing Doublelift, and I was not aware that he would be a free agent. As soon as Steve Arnset brought to my attention that Doublelift was available, I made the decision to sign him, knowing full well that he was in a relationship with Leena Zhu, our president of esports. My reasoning behind that decision was simple. I thought that Doublelift was the best candidate for his position. TSM had the most success with Doublelift on our roster, and our players and coaches and analysts unanimously approached me to sign Doublelift. TSM has not lived up to our expectations over the last 2 years. I owe it to the fans and Bjergsen, player and co-owner, to build the best possible roster. So look, I think even though Doublelift's performance kind of went off in the latter half of the last split he played while he was at Team Liquid, there's question marks about that, whether that was deliberate to try and manufacture a move. None of this really rings true. I've just got an intuitive hunch that there's a little bit of revisionist history here as well. Not that I could prove it, but it does seem very strange that Doublelift, who was in a relationship with Leena at that time at Team Liquid, his performance starts going down, and yet Steve Arnset is the guy who comes forward and says, yeah, actually, because his performance is going down, we want to offload him. Wouldn't it be great if TSM would take him, the organization that just so happens to be where his girlfriend works? Well, I mean, okay, sure, maybe that's possible. It also seems a little bit strange that you would offload a potential asset, even if he's not in the roster, by the way, because he's a huge brand name in himself, to one of your biggest rivals in the region. That the first person you call up, hey, TSM, hey, rivals, do you want to sign a player that's going to inadvertently make you money and perhaps even make you a team that can beat us? Kind of seems a little bit odd to me. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have got wind of him being in free agency. Of course they would. He would have told Leena. There's no getting away from that. That's why the conflict of interest existed when he was on Team Liquid anyway. But the way that it goes from being, Steve Arnset offered him, and I made the decision, and everyone else was coming at me, all the coaches, or everyone, all the players. Never Leena, not once. Okay. Well, I guess I'll just have to believe you, mate. I guess I'll just have to believe you. It is the most far-fetched story probably told ever. No, that's hyperbole. But it's very far-fetched to think that Leena would be oblivious to it, but everyone else would know. And you and only you, which we'll come to in a moment, would be making this roster move. I don't buy it for a second, frankly. And I think it insults people's intelligence to suggest it. Possible conflict of interest with Doublelift and Leena. Again, even in the title, even in the framing, it is not a possible conflict of interest. It is a conflict of interest with possible ramifications. That is a key difference. TSM, Leena, Reginald, Doublelift himself, almost every TSM apologist has refused to acknowledge that it is a conflict of interest, that it absolutely is. Even this ridiculous dogshit lawyers article that I saw that came out, which was clearly written by a fan and written by a contract lawyer, who, by the way, are a fucking dime a dozen. Contract law. We're talking about all sorts here. We're talking about, you know, athletic law, all sorts of stuff. It's not even, it doesn't even pertain to the language in a contract. Why a contract lawyer would be held up as some sort of, you know, authoritative voice on this issue is berserk to me, especially when it is clearly written from the perspective of a TSM fan. I might break down that article. I don't want to talk about it on this. I want to focus on Reginald stuff. But anyway, so it is a conflict of interest. It is. It's not possible. It is. It is a conflict of interest that possibly has repercussions. To be clear, most of Leena's day-to-day responsibility is the TSM's expansion into various game titles such as Fortnite, PUBG, Apex, WoW, Hearthstone. She has no decision-making power over our LCS rosters, players, or salaries. She works on business operations and content with the league. All roster decisions and budgeting are made by our general manager, Parth Naidu, and myself. Well, I'm going to call bullshit. I'm going to call bullshit, and I'm going to show you some evidence that I think should make you understand that it's bullshit. Because Leena herself seems to be under the delusion that she actually makes these changes, that she actually has input in rosters, that she actually does recruitment of players for League of Legends. I will show you some comments. Back when you signed Dardoch, the player you now, of course, have ended up inadvertently fucking over, she said that that was absolutely her doing. Here's a comment. Leena on Reddit. This is one of her accounts. Not true. Somebody said she didn't do the negotiations, and she replied with this. Not true. I do all the negotiations. We haven't even spoken about Dardoch. Not sure where the done deal is coming from, but this source is not accurate at all. This was at the time, by the way, when it was public knowledge they were signing Dardoch, and this is them lying about signing Dardoch. Edit. Not going to address actual roster moves here, just the validity of the original statement, which was Leena has nothing to do with these roster moves. Okay, no big deal. What about this comment? I know you have nothing to do with the roster decisions themselves, but holy shit, if Grigna starts and there was no attempt to get Dardoch, that's a massive failure on the org's part. Leena replies, definitely have a lot of say in the roster decisions, not sure where that assumption comes from. So these comments are only a year ago. So either what has happened in the past year is Leena's role and responsibility has been drastically altered. No one was told about it, I guess because no conflict of interest had arisen to tell us about it. Or Reginald in his mind thinks he handles all this shit. Leena, in her mind, thinks she handles all of this shit, and actually, it's indicative of poor communications and delegation of role within the company. Or maybe Leena is lying as a face-saving exercise because despite her many examples of incompetence and poor behavior, she wants to be taken seriously, and it does sort of suggest and intimate that she is not the great executive, the great big strong executive that she presents herself to be, if in actual fact she has to delegate those types of decisions to Reginald. But isn't it interesting that he lays out, oh, it's every other game, just not League of Legends, the one where the conflict of interest has arisen. How convenient. Again, I don't buy it. I don't think Leena is so fucking bamboozled, although she has proven herself to not be the sharpest knife in the drawer lately. I don't think she's that bamboozled. She doesn't know what she does for her job. So we've got either a lie or a very confused, muddled statement, and either Leena's lying or Reginald's lying. It's one or the other. And this is why I think it's Reginald. Because as you know, when all of this conflict of interest shit started coming up, Leena threw herself a pity party and decided that she would leverage her business connections to go on a podcast that is not authoritative about esports, that doesn't cover esports, that really doesn't cover a whole lot of much and wouldn't be relevant to our space and what we do, but certainly has lots of eyeballs on it. She went on the Offline TV podcast with Disguised Toast and Fademaster and Pokemon. And listen, you can't make it this easy to call you out on your bullshit, Reginald. You've got to at least look at this stuff yourself before you put out the twit longer. Because listen to what she says in the very first couple of minutes of the podcast.
Yeah, so right now I'm the president at TSM. I've been with TSM since, I think it's 8 years now. It's been since 2012, and right now I do everything in terms of recruiting players.
So again, it can't even be that her role has changed in the year, or did she specifically just not mean League of Legends and she does it for every other game? It's ridiculous. No one's buying it for a second. This is a magic trick. This is, this is the misdirection. Is Doublelift privy to confidential information? I mean, we can objectively say yes, based on not just the clip that went viral, but the clip after they deleted the VOD, which had her talking about an Apex Legends tournament in front of him.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure as a fucking League of Legends player, he doesn't need to know about the business operations of TSM and their expansion into Apex Legends competitions and who's going to be competing at it. But by the by, Dardoch's position change is not privileged information within our company. Fair comment. I imagine that teammates might, not always, but might, in some instances, especially when they're star players, because often star players get what they want on rosters, and they have a huge influence in what roster moves are made, especially in esports. Yeah, absolutely. He probably does know Dardoch's going to be leaving the team very soon, and they're looking to trade him. But it must be privileged knowledge. I mean, it must be privileged knowledge to know what offers are on the table for him. That is confidential to Dardoch and to the organization. When Leena says in the background of a call, no other organization wants Dardoch at the moment and we cannot trade him, that has to be privileged and confidential information. Because if a player knows about it and repeats it to somebody else and then repeats it to somebody else, first of all, there could be some other player out there who's like, oh, right, okay, I can manufacture a move right now. If this player's going here or not going there and I want to leave, you know, maybe I need to get my skates on. Let's say there was a world where Dardoch was wanted by only one team and there was another jungler about to enter free agency, one that was considered maybe equal to Dardoch. He could, if he found out through Doublelift or any other player that Dardoch was moving to that team, he could then contact that team through back channels, which we all know goes on in League of Legends. Let's not pretend poaching isn't a daily reality in the league, and basically get himself in there ahead of Dardoch based on the information he should never have known in the first place. So if you are telling me that what teams are interested in what players is not privileged information, then I don't know what to tell you. But of course, they don't specifically address that. They go on to say, every LCS player and esports manager at TSM knows of this change. The roster change decision was made by Path, our coaching staff, and the players of last season's LCS roster. And that's that. Does Leena decide on players on our LCS roster? No, Path and I decide on the roster with feedback from players, analysts, and coaches. What a weird thing. I mean, we've already touched upon why this is a lie, but why wouldn't you include your president? Oh, that's right. Your president's not included suddenly because it's convenient to win the argument that there isn't a conflict of interest. That's all they're going to say about that. They're now just going to move on. We're just going to muddle through, and now we're going to get to the greatest lie ever told in recent history by TSM, this week by TSM, and that is that there is some sort of sexist conspiracy around Leena. Now, first of all, and I hate doing whataboutism, and I think it's a really pathetic argument. It's so low intellectually. But I'll just add, if a male president was dating a female player that they had traded from another organization in dubious circumstances, continued to date them, potentially negotiated their contract, and was publicly coming out and saying, there's no conflict of interest here, nothing to worry about, people would be in uproar. So let's not bring gender to the table. I see this as a valid criticism regardless of gender, because it is. Because a situation either exists or it doesn't, and that's all there is to it. But what TSM wants you to think is that anybody who criticizes Leena, and I found this out the other night at the time of recording this because I got bombarded with some horrendous abuse, unthinkable abuse from TSM fans on the basis that I am supposedly sexist for holding an executive at a company Forbes values at $400 million to some sort of professional standard. That is the kind of, dare I say, simpery that is going on out there right now, and TSM are trying to stoke that feeling to distract from Leena's incompetence and poor behavior. Well, I'm not a moron, so I'm not fucking fooled. And I don't think my audience will be fucking fooled either, because in general, my audience aren't morons. Maybe TSM fans will swallow this hook, line, and sinker. Not me, not my audience. So anyway, it says, I noticed several hateful comments towards her. That is true. I have seen the type of comments she's got. I have seen people be disparaging, saying she's only at the company because she's Reginald's ex. You know, oh, women, what are they like? Can't keep, you know, you name it. Yes, there have been some of those, unquestionably. First of all, though, I'll just say they have been in the minority, and I have been generally pleasantly surprised by the maturity with which the community has conducted itself in regards to discussion around this topic. And just as another point, if you don't want people discussing who you are fucking and sort of making intimations about that, maybe just don't have sex with people you work with. I am sorry, but that is an expectation that has been, I mean, back in a past life when I used to work at just regular companies, that was an explicit rule. You could not work with somebody you were in a relationship with. Of course not. And the bigger the disparity between roles, and the more likely you are to have access to privileged information that could be shared with somebody, obviously the more seriously it's taken. Just not at TSM. So I noticed several hateful comments towards her. I agree her management of Josh's situation was very disappointing, and I believe the critical feedback specific to the situation was warranted, and I shared this with her as the CEO of this team. Despite that, it's very sad for me to see the community discredit her hard work as a female in esports. What does that even mean? You don't work at being a female in esports. You're either a woman and you work in esports, or you're a woman who doesn't work in esports. If you're a woman, you don't work hard at being a woman in esports. You just are a woman in esports. And I'll just say, as somebody that has worked alongside the best women in this industry across various games, I know that almost uniformly they would consider this special consideration for their gender to be hugely insulting and patronizing. And they say as such every time this is frivolously thrown out there. It's ridiculous. These are highly capable, highly talented, highly intelligent, highly skilled individuals, regardless of gender. They don't need a white knight coming over the fucking hill to fight their battles for them. They're more than capable of doing it themselves. And they don't need a special pat on the head and saying, oh, isn't it great that you're a woman at esports? Go get him, Tiger. For fucking shame at this backwards caveman attitude that I really hoped we would be free of by current year. But no, people are so... they have such a desire to try and insulate people from valid criticism. They will say anything to do it. Including this nonsense that she's some sort of victim in all of this. Anyway, let's continue. Despite that, it is very sad to see the community discredit her hard work as female in esports. She was not given this position because of her former relationship with me. I can absolutely assure the community Leena is deserving of her position. Leena has a long history with our organization. She originally volunteered to run TSM social media channels and content production while she was going to school. She helped build out that entire infrastructure with zero pay. She interviewed and made some of the first key hires on the content team that launched TSM Legends and practically every show on our YouTube channel. Leena was one of the first 5 employees that joined TSM and has helped grow our esports team from 5 players to 40 and a content team from nothing to 15. She has suggested many acquisitions that have allowed us to be profitable and helped us grow to where TSM is today. So no one is disputing any of that, nor is any of that relevant to the conversation. You do understand that you can be hugely successful, hugely talented, hugely intelligent, but you can still do something so woefully stupid and destructive that it would warrant your firing. This is how it tends to work in business, and I'm amazed I'm having to explain this to anybody. You are only as good as the last high-profile decision you get correctly. You may get special dispensation for having a long tenure. You may get special dispensation for having made the company a lot of money. But if you fuck up monumentally, there are generally consequences for doing so, no matter who you are, what level you operate at, or what you have done for the company lately. In Leena's case, there has been zero consequences. There has been zero indication you will even move to insulate the team, the organization, the business, to protect it from further fuck-ups predicated on this conflict of interest. And instead, you're just going to write a litany about all of the things she got correct. Brilliant. This isn't her first fuck-up. This isn't the first blot in her copybook, and it would be irrelevant even if it was. The fact is, Leena has made a number of high-profile gaffes and has conducted herself way below the status and standard that should be applied to a president of a multi-million-dollar company. What you've said here is you have told her you are disappointed. That is not a significant enough punishment, and clearly you have no intention of taking this matter further and think that you can just say, hey, people are only focusing on this because she's a woman. God damn those lousy sexists. Now, what should happen next, in my opinion, off the back of this, because TSM have clearly shown no willingness whatsoever to deal with this situation, is that Riot Games are going to have to hold some sort of investigation. This is a serious lapse in conduct. This has had a serious negative impact on one of their players they are bound to protect within their ecosystem. We all know the huge conflict of interest on the player association. That means that actually Dardoch's not likely to get relief there, because we've got a TSM co-owner on the board as vice president, we've got Leena's boyfriend on the board as vice president, and we have someone on his current roster who don't want him and he's no longer a part of in the role as treasurer. Somehow, TSM have been allowed to take over the Players Association, and no one has said and done a thing about it. So Riot Games must investigate this, must make an insistence that Leena recuse herself from League of Legends operations for the duration of their relationship. And they must impress upon TSM that this has to be enforced under pain of some sort of penalty in the league, whether it's forfeiture of points or removal. That is the only way to fix this issue. All of the bullshit twitlongers that you put out there, filled with lies and platitudes, are not going to change that. And frankly, while I'm disappointed this is how TSM has chosen to act, I'm not surprised at all. Esports continues to operate at a level so embarrassingly below real businesses that we're going to see more situations like this in the future, I'm absolutely sure. Anyway, those are my thoughts. That's everything you need to know about Reginald's reaction to the Leena leaks. I've been so thankful to everyone for all the support lately. We've had a huge spike in subs on the channel, huge spike on followers. So again, once again, I'll ask you, if you're new and you like having information broke down to you in this way and you're interested in esports, throw me a subscribe, click the bell, throw a comment under the video, give me some feedback, find me on Twitter, whatever you want to do. Thanks so much for all the support, and take care of yourselves until the next video.